Do you need to install Xcode? Are you not sure how to get started with iOS or macOS app development on Mac platforms? If that's the case, this is the video that you need to watch. This is actually a series of videos that you can watch all about Xcode. I'm going to introduce you to the most popular code editor on the Mac platform for Apple devices. All right, so let's go over the 3 topics that we're going to talk about today. We're going to learn a little bit about Xcode. Then we're going to get into installing Xcode. There's a few different ways we can leverage. And then we're going to create your very first Xcode project. So let's talk about Xcode. Xcode is a integrated development environment. And so what that means is that it allows you to write code, it allows you to test code, to design user interfaces, and you can debug them. And so that helps you find out problems as you're running the code live on an iPhone device or a virtual simulator. It's a great tool. It's similar to Eclipse or Android Studio or Visual Studio Code or even just text edit, except it's got a lot more features than that. All right, so let's talk about what you can do with it. In Xcode, we can build iOS and macOS apps. There's a lot of different types of apps that we can create. We're not just limited to these. You could make a C program. You could do a C++ program. You could make a Vision OS app. There's a lot of different options within the Apple ecosystem. The most common are going to be iOS and macOS. The other thing that's important to understand is that if you want to publish on the App Store, you're going to need Xcode in order to do that. This is the only way to submit apps to the App Store. There are ways to do it on the command line, but this is really the only app that sort of integrates with all of the different things that you need to do to create an archive of an app and publish it to the App Store so you can sell it or give it away for free. So that is why we need Xcode. So let's dive over to it and learn a little bit more about Xcode. So this is the Xcode web page, and we can get to this from developer.apple.com, and I will have the links down below. So just click the links down below if you want to get access to these links. So this is Xcode. This is what it's going to look like when you install it. You've got your code editor, and we'll take a look at it, and you've got a live preview over on the right. There's a bunch of new features. You can always get access to the latest WWDC videos to learn what's new in Xcode. And I think I'll be talking about that in another video just to give you an overview of important features for beginners. There's a lot of great features in here for compiling your different code. This is looking at a build timeline to see what is taking so long to build the app. Here you can be organized. We're looking at localizations of different words if you want to sell your app in multiple languages. And then we have support for Swift and SwiftUI, as well as Objective-C and other programming languages. And here we can see live previews of this code that is written in SwiftUI right here being rendered and showing the different widget sizes for some of the contents for this bird app, Backyard Birds. And the other thing that's really powerful is the debugging. So this is where you can set a breakpoint, which is this blue little flag. Your code will stop so that you can inspect the state of the application, figure out what variables are what, and see if there's any print statements or error messages, and then sort of triage a problem. Sometimes you run into crashes. This is an invaluable tool, and there are a lot of other advanced features that allow you to detect memory issues, threading issues, you name it. Xcode does it all. And in my opinion, it's way better than Visual Studio if you're coming from a Windows build environment. All right, so that is Xcode. Let's learn how to install it. So to install it, we are going to cover 3 different ways to do it. So I'm going to show you the most popular way, which is going to be to install it from the Mac App Store. But we're also going to learn how to download it from developer.apple.com. And I'm going to show you a direct way of doing that and then an indirect way of doing that. The other thing to keep in mind before we get into this is depending on what Mac you're on, you are going to need to check your system requirements. Not all Macs can run the latest version of Xcode. Sometimes you need to update your Mac. So I am now on Sequoia. I did a fresh install on an SSD just to test this out. And you might need to do that if you cannot. And I'll have a link down below if you want to learn how to install Sequoia on an SSD that you could run instead of updating your Mac if there's critical applications that you cannot update for. So one of the things you have to keep in mind is to publish apps. Sometimes we need to use the latest version of macOS to install the latest version of Xcode. All right, so let's get into that. So at the very top here, there's going to be a download link. You can get access to both Xcode and Xcode betas. If I click on Xcode, that's going to take me over to the App Store. You can just search for it on the App Store. If you want to search, you will find Xcode here. Searching for it will give you the most recent version of Xcode. Depending on your version of Mac OS that's installed, you're going to see probably a different version. So here I can see 16.1. I don't know. I don't know how this looks on older Macs, but it's most likely going to show you like 15.6 if you're stuck on Sonoma or something like that, where it's not going to be able to install. I think you can install 16.0, but you won't be able to install 16.1 unless you've installed the latest version of Mac OS. And that's typically how Apple works. Right? So the easiest way to install it is just to hit this button. And if you're already authenticated with the App Store, this should download. This says it's downloading insanely fast, which is great. If we hover over it, we can see it's doing about 40 megabytes per second, and it's got to download 2.9 gigabytes. All right, so that's not a bad download speed right now, and it's smaller than I thought it was. So I don't know if they reduced the file size. There are two other ways that I want to show off. So if you click this download and you want to go to betas, this is another way where you can install Xcode without the App Store. And I am going to turn off this. Actually, I'm not going to filter. I'm just going to switch over to applications up in the top bar here from that link. And here you can get access to the latest version of Xcode, and you can get access to the release notes. So if you want to see what has changed, these are all the release notes for Xcode 6.1, 16.1. And then all of the main new features between releases are going to be in the non.1 release. So the 16 release notes is going to have a ton of new features that you can read about, including a lot of C++ features. Okay, so that's how you can get access to Xcode. A place that I go all the time to download Xcode, because I need to have multiple versions of Xcode installed on my Mac as I'm doing work. You might not necessarily need this if you're just getting started, but I like to control that a little bit. Otherwise, it will automatically update. So if you need to install like older versions, let's say you're working on an app and you have to support a previous version of Xcode because you can't migrate over, in that case, you can download them here. The challenge is some of these stop working on newer versions of Mac OS. So that is another sort of cutoff that's making this a little bit challenging to run older versions of Xcode. But this will get you access to those betas as well as the released one. So you can see a release version of 16.1 is available here. All right, so since that is now downloaded, we can see that it is installing Xcode. And I don't know how long this is going to take. It's been a while since I've installed from the Mac App Store on a clean, fresh install. So it looks like this is going to take a little bit of time. All right, so let's talk through what we're seeing here. Can I make this bigger? There we go. All right, so we're going to open up Xcode once it's finished installing, and probably the most important button you're going to see is this play button. This play button is how we can start and stop the app and run it on a simulator or on a real iPhone. So if you have a real iPhone, you can just started up with that. Now, you don't need to be a paying developer to test your app on an iPhone. You can install apps to your iPhone. They will last for, I think, 7 days, and then they will expire, and you'll have to reinstall them if you want to keep on using them. So that's what you can do on a free sort of Apple ID developer account. If you want it so that it doesn't time out after 7 days, then you're going to have to pay for Apple's developer license, which I think is around $99 a year in the US. And that will allow you to also use test flights so that you can do beta tests with friends and family and potential customers. So that's a big benefit of paying for the subscription. And that's the only way that you can sell apps in the App Store. So you'll need that subscription once you're ready to submit to the App Store. We're going to have a list of files over on the left. This is our project navigator. This is our code editor. Right now, this is SwiftUI code. And then this is a preview, which allows us to see what the app will look like. This works most of the time, but it sometimes fails when we have issues with the code. So if the code's not perfect and there's compilation errors, this will not be visible, and neither will your simulator. You won't be able to run it on a real device or a simulator. When we're in this mode down here, I'll just call attention to it now since we're waiting. This allows you to interact with the app. There's this other mode that lets you select things, which is, in my opinion, a little bit buggy, so I don't really use that feature. But that also lets you see the content a little bit differently. So I will probably show that off. And then it looks like we're ready to configure Xcode for the first time. So let's see what's going on here. So this says multiple extensions added. And this is all of the new security permissions thing. I guess I'm supposed to just read this list. Like, I don't understand some of these notifications, but it looks like the only one that I saw Xcode in, and let's see if it's in this list. I see simulator here. Okay, so simulator can share, and then spotlight. Okay, so that's what that little pop-up was all about. Cool. There's going to be some more things once we open up Xcode that we're going to have to deal with. So I'm going to hit this open button. You're going to have to agree to the license, and then you're going to have to type in your computer password. This is not your Apple ID password. This is your computer password. And now we're going to have to download Simulator. So if you want to make iPhone apps, you're going to click this button to install iOS. If you want to do watchOS, tvOS, or visionOS, you're going to have to click these other things. I'm only going to be doing iOS on this machine and macOS, so macOS is already built in. And then we can click this. I thought this would work. It worked in one of the betas, but maybe it's not going to work on an external hard drive. I'm not sure. It's not giving me a reason for why I can't install this, but that's okay. That's just going to be one less thing to download. So let's go ahead, download and install. Now this is going to install system components for us, and it says Xcode must relaunch to continue. Xcode needs to relaunch to use updated frameworks. So let's relaunch Xcode. It's going to open it up. So there's this new code assistance thing. I tried this briefly in the beta. It wasn't super helpful. We now have Swift 6 built into Xcode. This is good. There's a lot of data race safety that's built in. It is a lot to learn. So as a beginner, you're probably not going to be dealing with that right away. And then we have a new testing framework called Swift Testing that's only for unit testing. It is not for UI testing yet. So that is new. We've got previews. So previews are going to share build data. So if you're new, this means nothing to you. But previews are going to share the same build data as a normal app run, which is huge because previously you had to basically build the app 2 different times, one for previews and one for when you actually want to run the app. Now you're going to be able to just build once and run it on either target sort of thing. So that makes them boot up faster. The big benefit for you, it's faster on Xcode 16. And then build-in diagnostics, some improved debugging, faster builds with explicit modules. You get more insights into thread performance checker and that flame graph view, which we saw briefly in that one thing. Okay, if we click this, we're going to see a full list, and it's just going to take us to the changelog for Xcode updates. Oh, this is actually a good one to look at. These are notable changes in Xcode, and I might run through this separately. This is a totally different link than the release notes themselves. Okay, so we have this pop-up. This is a NS panel that has popped up, and it's asking if we will allow Xcode to find local devices on local networks. This allows us to connect to your iPhone remotely via the network. So we're going to say allow. And if you say don't allow, then you're going to need to enable that in the privacy settings. Okay, I'm going to close out of that. We can see that the simulator is almost all the way downloaded. And we're just going to hit continue. All right, so this is the welcome screen for Xcode 16.1. And we can see we got a nice kind of material design. It looks like there's a little bit, it looks shiny to me. It looks like there's like a bloom effect here. All right. So I believe Xcode has installed the build tools. There's command line build tools that we need to install, and we can see those over in the locations, and we can see what is installed. So command line tools, you'll need this when you're doing any kind of development with other things as well that need to access the build tools. So that is already set up if we install it from the App Store. If we download it separately, you can click this drop down to switch which version of Xcode is installed on the command line. And I'm not going to talk about the command line in this series, but that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add your Apple ID account. So let's go ahead and connect your Apple ID. So mine is just my email address. So I'll just type that in right here. Then I'll hit next, and then I will type my password if I can remember what this is. Hopefully I typed that right. And that will add my account, and then that's a good starting point for Xcode. All right, so once we have that configured, this will allow you to run it on a device or submit it to the App Store. So that's important when we want to do that. Next, we are going to close this, and that welcome to Xcode screen was this screen. We can create a new project by clicking this button if you didn't close it, or we can go to File, New, and then Project. So once we do that, we're going to see a bunch of different options here. It looks like the first thing that's selected is a multi-platform app. I'm going to recommend that you start with just an iOS or a macOS app. So iOS is still downloading, so I don't know if it will let it. I think it will let you create the app, but it might not let you actually run it until that simulator is installed. And actually, you should be able to run it on the real device if you have the developer account. All right, so my computer's thinking really hard, and it looks like I disappeared. But I should be coming back as soon as this sort of finishes doing whatever it needs to do. Apparently, that's using all the CPU power. So we are going to create our very first project in Xcode now, and we're going to start a brand new project. So I showed you the screen to start it. We talked about choosing the project template. And once we get that going, we're going to then explore the project structure. And then we will be able to run your first app. So let's dive into all of that. So I am going to choose iOS. We're going to do app, and then we're going to hit next. And then here, my first app. If you set up your team, you can select it here. If you didn't, just keep it on none. You should still be able to run it on the simulator. For me, this is going to be com.paulsolt. This is usually a reverse DNS. So this is a reverse of whatever your website is, just to make it unique. This is going to match whatever your team identifier is up there. So we're going to go with SwiftUI. Storyboard is if we are doing UI kits. And the language is going to be Swift. And then we are not going to do anything with testing. So I'm just going to hit none for testing, and we're not going to touch any of this. So I'm just going to hit next right now. So let's go ahead, and I like to put things. So I typically go up a directory. So if you go to your user directory, I typically make a new folder here. And there's a button right here. I'm doing the keyboard shortcut, which is Command-Shift-N. So new folder, and I just call it dev. And I like to, we could use a Git repository and sort of just let that go. I'm not probably going to do anything with Git right now, but we'll go ahead and create it. Okay, so that failed because, okay, this is actually a good learning thing to cover. So the Git repository creation failed. We need to set the author settings in order to make this work. So if you don't have like, well, actually you don't need GitHub right now, but this is just going to be your name and then your email address where people can reach you if they're looking at commits that you do. So this is the one I have associated with GitHub. And I'm going to prefer to rebase when pulling. I highly recommend this. I have another video that talks about Git rebase on YouTube if you want to watch that. And I may do another series on just Git in general, but that I think is going to do us a lot of favors. All right, once you do that, you should be able to then go to integrate up on the top left and then click on new Git repository and hit create. And it should create that repository for you. And it will have a main branch, and you're going to have your initial commit. So the initial commit is going to have all of these files. As soon as we start changing these files, we are going to see that there's an M for modified, and this will track the changes that you make. So you can sort of see what has changed here. So I changed this from Hello World to Hello Paul. Now, this is preview. Preview is running right now. If we have a compiler issue, so if I get rid of the trailing brace here, and I'm going to just make this hide, we're going to see that there's a compilation error. So it's expecting a closing parenthesis, and it's saying that there's an open one here and there's nothing here. So here you're going to see errors in preview where it says syntax error, and you're going to have to fix this in order to get preview to work. If we click this, you're going to see the same type of error at the very top here, and you can just hit OK. So we can fix that issue just by bringing that back. Now I'm going to make this slightly bigger using Command+ to make the text just a little bit bigger since my monitor is so large. Xcode Simulator is downloaded, so I don't need this anymore. So I can just hit the X. And then this notification banner for Xcode, clicking on it, I don't care about getting notifications from Xcode, so I just have this always off. I like apps to not bother me. That's just my stance, but you could turn this on if you wanted to. And we are good to go with that. If you double click here, or maybe here, that will get Xcode to fill the whole space. The one thing I think I noticed on Sonoma as well as Sequoia is there's like a 1 pixel drop shadow, and I can see the trees through the background, which I don't like. So if that bothers you, you can use a darker wallpaper or something different. So if we go for like a Middle East Earth image, and now how do I get to my desktop? Like this. So just having black up there, I find is helpful. And then you don't see that annoying little thing. So that's just what I'm going to do on my system, because it is, I like the picture, but I do not like that line. And once you see it, maybe you can't unsee it. So I'm sorry. But that's going to make your development environment a little bit better. The other thing that we can customize before we do any more code is for, let's see. Okay, so here we get the root cause of my issue. Predictive code completion is not available when booted from an external disk. So this worked in one of the early betas, but it is apparently a not supported configuration, which is unfortunate. So I cannot show that until I update my main machine. All right, so what I want to show off is the themes. This is a great way to customize how Xcode looks. I'm a little colorblind, so I like the high contrast dark. This is my default theme, and I just typically do a size 14 font as sort of a rule of thumb. That looks pretty good on a 27-inch monitor. I used to do it a lot smaller, but as you can see, I wear glasses and my vision's not as good as it used to be. So 13 or 14 is more comfortable for me. And it also makes it so that you can see the code that I'm demonstrating and see more of it on the screen. But it's not too big. So that's kind of what I would recommend, is find one of these that you like. And I don't know if there's anything else in here we need to really cover right now. So what I did before is I just changed this to say, hello, Paul. I want you to find the code, and you're just going to type your name here. So just say hello and then whatever your name is. And then underneath this, we are going to try a modifier. So we can make this bold, and we will see that becomes bold. Or I can comment it out with command/. So command / will comment or uncomment, which is very helpful. I could even set the font. And if we do a .system, we can fully control the size that we get here. So there is a size and weight. Or another option here is we could do like a large title, and we will see that gets a lot bigger. So the benefit of a large title is that this is a dynamic font, and it will change based on the dynamic font setting of the user's iPhone. So it can get larger or smaller for people who are configuring how big and small fonts are. All right, so that's an example of that. Above this, we have a system name image. So this is a SF symbol, and I don't have, we don't have SF symbols installed here, or we haven't installed it. That's going to be something I cover in another video. So I'll have to do another video just on that. There's other symbols like sun, I believe, cloud. Here's cloud.sun. So we can get access to these different pictures, and then we can even do, it's not the rendering mode, but the style. Let's see. Okay, here's what it's called now, symbol rendering mode. And then I want the multicolor. So I'm using code completion to help me remember what these settings are. And that still didn't work. Do I need the .fill? That's what it is. So it's the one with the .fill that has the rendering mode, and now we can't see it. So we can fix that by doing a background. And in the background, we can do color.black. We should be able to just omit the dot black, and that's probably not the right color. Let's go with blue. We'll do a slight gradient, and we can see that. So that is an example of colorizing this. If we're going to go with this, then I'm going to recommend that we change the font color. So we set the foreground style to white. It's going to make that pop a little bit better. And now when it comes to SwiftUI, and we'll talk more about this in future videos, it's only going to hug the content. So this is kind of like the content hugging in UI kit, if you're familiar with that, where the size of the label and the size of the image are going to sort of dictate how big this is. If we want this to take up more space, we need to play around with the frame. And so one of the things that we can do here is, well, there is a padding. So the order of operations also matters here. So if I move the background after the padding, you can see that the background now has some additional padding. But if we want this to really fill out the content, the trick for that is to do a frame and then max width and set this to dot infinity, and then a max height and set this to infinity. So if we do those two things, that's going to make it work. The downside is I did that after the background, so I have to move that up a line, and I can do that with the Option Command left square bracket, and we're going to see that it now takes up the whole iPhone screen. So that's a little bit of getting started with your first app. What I want to show you is just running it. So if we go ahead and hit the run button, that will cause it to start a simulator. So we're going to see a simulator starts up, which is this little icon here. And this is going to take a little bit of time. Once it installs and sets up for the very first time, it will start your app, and you'll just wait and wait and wait as it's preparing to launch. This first launch is usually the slowest, and so we'll just wait for it. Okay, and there we have it. So that's a good starting point. You can now also run this on your actual iPhone. So I should be able to, I think you have to plug your iPhone in for the first time before you can do it remotely over the Wi-Fi. So I'm going to plug my iPhone in right now, and we'll just see if we can get that working as well. If not, I will address it in the next video. All right, so I see my iOS device. There is a developer mode you have to enable in order to test on real devices. And when you do this, you're going to see a dialog to trust. So make sure you hit trust and then type in your device password. And there may be some additional settings in general. And then if you go down to there should be a setting VPN device management under the general tab. And in here, you may see something about giving approval to the iPhone, or somewhere along the bottom, there may be something. And then in terms of developer mode, let's see if I can search for developer mode. This may require you, this is under privacy and security. So if you go into privacy and security on your phone, and then you scroll all the way to the bottom, there is a developer mode at the very bottom here, and you have to enable that in order to run apps. That is going to lower the security of your device. So keep that in mind. But it's not bad if it's less secure, but it's the only way that you can test out apps before they're on the App Store. So if you don't want to be tracked and security is important, you might need a separate device to test on so that your primary device is more secure. All right. I think when you turn that on, you have to restart your iPhone, and then you'll be good to go to actually run the app. And so if I hit the run button right here, I don't want to do that right now. I'm just going to have to update my other computer to Sequoia because I don't want it to revoke my certificate so that I can run it off of this SSD hard drive. But it's ready to run and install. I think I have to just transfer those keys over. That's a separate issue that you don't have to worry about. All right, so we covered a lot of ground in this. I hope that this was helpful. We learned a little bit about Xcode. We learned how to install it, different ways that you can install it if you need to have multiple versions running. And then we created your very first project, which is a SwiftUI app that is now displaying a text message on the screen. We customized it a little bit, used an SF symbol up here that has a multicolor rendering mode. And in the next video, we are going to get into just talking through all of the Xcode layouts, how to edit code a little bit more, how to use the debug area, and running your app. In that video, I'll make sure that I can actually run my app so that you're not on the edge of your seat waiting to sort of see what that looks like. Thanks for watching. If this was helpful, hit the like button, and I will have some links down below. If you have any questions, just comment down below and I will get back to you. Thanks for watching and have a great day.